Let's take a look at 10 ways to make rooms in Blender. Now this is a list of different approaches and they're all interchangeable. There's no right way or wrong way. They all have pros and cons. And you can just watch these and just do the one that makes the most sense to you. And there's a lot of things that you'll do for one method that you'll need to do for other methods as well. But we'll just jump right in here. But before we take a look at the actual 10 ways, let's take a look at our camera. I'm going to select my camera, back out of my scene, see that I have it selected. And if you come down here to the Properties tab there and find the little green camera and click on the green movie camera there, you'll notice that by default the focal length of cameras in Blender is set to 50 millimeter, and that's great for a character or a close-up of an object, but we really want to come in here and set this to something like 30. You can just type in 30 and hit enter or return. You don't need to type the MM, and then that's just going to widen our view a little bit so it won't feel quite so claustrophobic when we're inside of rooms. Option number 1, just use the default cube. We basically need a box to be our room, and look, we've got a box. So we can do that, but we do need to be aware of a couple of things if we use the default cube for our room. First of all, I'm going to tab into the object here and select all these sides, and I'm going to hit the S key and just scale it up 2. Just hit S and 2 and enter and scale it up twice as big. Because remember, our default cube is 2 meters tall, which is 6.5 feet. That's a little small for a room. And you don't, unless you're trying to copy some architectural drawings or something, you don't need to be too aware of scale, but you want to keep things kind of roughly in scale because things like lighting and materials and physics, if you get into any of that, those things will be affected by the size of your object. So if your model is teeny tiny or really enormous, that could cause weird things to happen later on. So just, be kind of roughly aware of what you're doing with the scale. I'm going to come over here and grab this top face and just push it down a little bit. That looks fine. That'll work. And now I've got a box that will fit the scene. I'm actually going to hit the A key and hold the snapping down. I've just got the regular increment snapping down, and I'm going to hold down my control or command button here, grab the blue arrow on my move gizmo, and I'm just going to pull this up 2 snaps there. Snap, snap, and that should pull it right up onto the floor plane. You don't have to do that, but it's a tidy thing to do. Now what I need to do, I'm going to hit the 0 key to look through my camera and see it's not quite inside the box. I'm going to hit the 7 to go to the top view here. Remember, you can use the gizmo here, or you can touch the tilde key and move things around here as well. So I'm just going to stay in top view, and I'm going to find my camera over here. I'm going to exit out of the object mode there. I'm just going to pull my camera and make sure that it is inside the box. Yeah, that looks pretty good there. So now I can come over here and click on the little camera button there, or I can use the tilde key, or I can hit the 0 key on my full-size keyboard. And now I'm looking through the camera. I'm going to hit my Q key right now and look for lock camera to view, because now I can sort of move my camera around in the scene anywhere that I want. And that looks pretty good. Now, if you don't have that option, that lock camera to view, remember to turn it off. Let me show you where it lives. So I'm going to hit the N key. It's over here in this little side panel. You want to click on this View tab over here, and you'll see that camera to view is on there. So every time you click on that, that'll allow you to move the camera around with pan and zoom and all that kind of thing. And then remember to turn this off when you're all done. So I'm going to deselect that and hit the N key to close that. So how do you get that to be in your quick favorites? Well, you just right click on the name of something and say add to quick favorites. You can also assign a shortcut to it, but there's a lot of shortcuts and you'll have to probably take it off something else. So I think it's better just to add it to your quick favorites, and then you can hit the Q key, and then it's right there when you need it, and that saves you having to go into the N side panel all the time. So just make sure that it's turned off. It is. I'm going to leave that turned off, and I'm going to talk about the other thing that can be tricky about this. And this is true for a lot of the different techniques that I'm going to show you here. I'm going to come over here to the viewport overlays and just be aware that face orientation is an option we can do. And right now everything is red. Red, that doesn't sound good. So I'm going to exit out and say, oh, look, it's all blue on the outside. Well, what does that mean? So remember that faces have a front and a back side, and the cube is meant to be seen from the outside, right? You're going to take this cube and turn it into an alien or a race car or something, right? And we're going to be modeling from the outside, but we've just put the camera inside the box, which means that the camera is now looking at all the inside faces. So we can fix that quite easily. I'm just going to select the cube and hit tab, hit the A key to select all, and because they're all backwards, I can just come up here to mesh and come down to normals and find flip. So Alt N or Option N, and then I can say flip. You can also recalculate outside or inside. That's good if you have a mix of them. But right now, all we need to do is just select flip, everything turns red on this side. I'm going to jump into the camera view and looks good. Everything's now blue on the inside. And once you have that, you can turn off the face orientation overlay. You don't actually have to have that on. I'm just using that so that you can see exactly what that's doing. So now all I need to do is hit the 2 key to jump in, and I'm going to use my Control and R to add some ring cuts over here, and I'll just set those there. And I'll come over to the other side and Control or Command R and put a few more on this side and click again and set them, and then a few more going up vertically. And again, where you put these is kind of up to you and what your idea is for your room. So I'm going to jump into the face select mode here now, and I'm just going to grab a couple of these with Shift and Control and grab a whole bunch of those and just hit delete. And then if I delete faces, I've just made a doorway. Well, another way you might want to do that, though, is to extrude into that direction, and now you could make a hallway, or you could just make a little bit of an inset or a little alcove or whatever you think. And then you could come in now at this point and hit the I key and inset there a little bit and turn that into a window or a door or whatever. So you can start kind of grabbing things. I do recommend, however, if you want to add like a column, let's come over here and we'll add a column to this wall. So I'm going to select this face and I'm going to hold down Shift and Control or Shift and Command and just jump and click all of the things between those. I'm going to use this little version of the extrude, this extrude manifold. It's a new version that's come out, and then it allows doing this kind of thing just a little bit tidier. So I'm going to pull this into the room here just to make a sort of a column, or maybe it's a chimney or something like that. And by using this extrude manifold, if I jump out to the outside of it, we can see that it has cleaned up all these faces. It hasn't left in a whole bunch of extra faces. When you start kind of pushing and pulling things sometimes like that, you can leave a lot of extra faces that can cause problems. But this extrude manifold is a really great way to sort of just grab something and yank on it and have it kind of clean itself up as it goes. I could do the same thing over here, and now as I pull this into the scene here, I can make an extra wall, or I can push it in the other direction. There's a lot of really fun things that you can do with this option. So there we go. We've got a room pretty quickly just by using the inside of the default cube. Option number 2, building blocks. This is the digital equivalent of going to your pantry and grabbing some mac and cheese boxes and some soup cans and just sort of stacking them up on your table and making a model that way. So I just took a cube and I just made a few copies of it, and I went and resized it to make it this sort of slab shape. Remember, you can just select it and say Shift D, and then you can hit Enter and then just push out another copy of it. And now you've got another face that you can rotate around and make a few sideways. And again, you don't have to stick with this shape here. It's not like actual blocks. I could say Shift D and make a copy of this one. I'll just pull it down over here. Oh, I've also moved into vertex snapping mode over here. This is useful for this as well, because I can do things like hit the G key and then hold down Control or Command while I grab that corner, and it'll snap right to it. So I've got it stacked perfectly on top. Then if I just tab into that, I can just sort of pull these faces out and just say, well, I want to make this one a little bit bigger and that one a little bit bigger. And now look, I've got steps pretty easily. This is also a great place to introduce the idea of using Boolean operations to make doors and windows. So I'm going to tab out of that one and grab this one over here. We'll just move it a little closer to our model. And then I'm going to use this little block to create a window or a door. So I'm going to pull it up into the shape here and make sure that it's poking all the way through. Here, I'll make it a little bit more center there. And remember, we're taking this shape out of the brown one here. So I'm going to select that one, come over here to the Add Modifier. That's the little blue wrench. I'm going to click on this Add Modifier and add a Boolean operation. So when I do that, I needed to tell it, well, which one of these am I using to cut out of the hole here? This is a great place for the eyedropper, because I have a whole bunch of cubes up here right now. I'm not sure which is which. So if I click on the eyedropper, then I can come over here and say, oh, okay, that's cube 007. All right, this cube is 007. It's got a license to bool here. So I'm going to make sure that, actually, as soon as I do that, it's already done. All I need to do is find 007 and hide it. And I can see, yeah, there's a window there, and it is all set and ready to go. The nice thing about this is it's non-destructive. I can always come back to 007 here and move it around. And I could just move the wall around in this case, or what I meant to do there is move the block around. And you can always just keep on hiding it and say, yeah, that looks great. You can also resize the block. Let me turn that back on and just select it and just say scale. I'll make it a little bit bigger there if I wanted to turn it into a door, or I could scale it down even farther. You can keep on changing this around and non-destructively move walls and doors and things. You can use any shape here. It could be a circle. It could be anything you want. When you're all done and happy, though, so maybe you wanted to make a duplicate array or something where you wanted to apply this modifier. Remember, you can come over here and apply it by just finding the apply selection and this little drop down arrow here, or just hover over the modifier and put Control or Command A in, and that will apply it. So now I still have 007 here, and I can move it around and use it somewhere else in my scene. And even if I wanted to decide I wanted to change this shape now, I could hit Tab and I could select one of these faces, and I can still push it around. I can make this window wider or skinnier or whatever. I just don't have the cookie cutter of the block, but it still allows me to very easily push these faces around and change the shape of these openings. So those are very good ways for you to create really simple shapes. And this is particularly good too when you're not going to worry too much about finishing it in Blender, and then just export that image, take it into Photoshop, paint over it, and you're good to go.
Is there something special about number 3?
Option number 3, plain edges. This is the first of a couple of versions that are kind of similar, but they all have different pros and cons. So I've just got a regular plane. Instead of using the default cube, I've just started with a plane. I'm going to tab into it and then just hit the S key and scale it up, say 4 times. That's pretty good. That'll work. And now what I can do is just subdivide this, or I can extrude the edges as they are, or I can put in loop cuts. So if I were to come in here and say Control or Command R and just add a couple of cuts, maybe I'll add 2 in this direction, and maybe I'll Control or Command R and add 3 or 4 in this direction. So something like that. So now I've got some faces that I can work with. I'm in edge mode now, so I could come over here and grab like these 2 edges and just hit extrude and push it off in the X direction. If I put E to extrude and then tap the X key, then I know I'm going in the red X axis over here. I can do that. Maybe I can grab one of these and I could hit E to extrude and tap the Y key to lock it into the Y direction here. Maybe I've got a little hallway kind of coming into my room. And then maybe I'll make a little alcove over here. E to extrude, Y, and I'll push it off in that direction. So now I have a kind of an interesting floor plan for my scene. And I can come in with these edges here. We'll see, I'll start over here and I'll hold Shift and Control or Shift and Command down. I'll see how far I can get. So I'm just going to come over here and keep on adding to this selection. Maybe I'll leave these sides open. And now I'm going to type E to extrude and Z, and I'm just going to pull upward. And now I can just take a look at my scene there. That looks great. I've got a whole room basically instantly in a couple of steps. Now what I can do is start chopping up the walls horizontally. So I can come in and say Control R on here, and I'll add maybe a couple of loop cuts going this way. And then now I can make, let's do a door over here. So I'll do Control R and I'll make a space for a door. And I can grab the face mode now, and I can grab these here and hit delete, and I'll delete those faces. So there's a couple of things that you can do here. Of course, we could just extrude these faces, but we can also use a modifier that's great for these like paper thin walls. But before we do that, we're going to have a better time if we take the floor out of this. So I'm in the face select mode. I'm going to select any one of the faces on my floor. I'm going to show you a keyboard shortcut that I use all the time that I think is really handy. I'm going to hold Shift and G down, and I'm going to select similar, and I'm going to select, in this case, coplanar. There's a lot of really great ways that you can select things that makes selecting really fast. So there we go. I've selected all of the floor faces just like that. And I'm going to hit the P key and separate by selection since I have them all selected. Now you can see the color change. The floors, I've got a new floor in here, and if I hit the Tab key and exit out of that, I can make a copy of this even too if I wanted to. Shift D and hit enter, and now I've got a ceiling as well. So I could just make a whole room here that easily. But, and really you could be done at this point and just say like, that's good enough for what I need. But in many cases, if you're going to light this scene, especially if you're going to have light on the outside of the walls, like a sunlight or an HDR world light in here, these really paper thin walls can cause weird light bleed problems. And there's a couple of ways to fix that. But one of the things that you can do is add a modifier right now to the walls. So I'm going to make sure I have the walls selected. I've got the blue wrench down over here. I'm going to click Add Modifier, and I'm going to add a Solidify modifier. So a Solidify modifier just makes things that are one plane thicker. So if we come over to the edge here, we can see it hasn't done much because by default it makes it very skinny. But I'm just going to push this number up here until we can see that that thickness has gotten pretty good. Now if I take a look at the top view here, we can see there's a few of these kind of like weird places where it's sort of bowed out, and that's because we've got where some of the loop cuts are. It's caused this weird problem. That's fixable with one click here, just by coming over here to even thickness. I'm just going to click one click on even thickness, and that's going to take care of that problem here. I'm just going to delete my ceiling. So I'm going to take a look at the scene here now and see that that spot there that did not have a reveal suddenly does. The neat thing about it is that if I select my walls again and I hide from the viewport, the modifier here, it still is paper thin. So I can come back in, hit the Tab key and say, maybe I'll add a couple of loop cuts over here, and I'll add another little doorway or a window or something like that. And if I just hit delete now, delete faces, I've still got this sort of like, folded paper model. But as soon as I turn back the modifier, I get that reveal again. And when you're all happy with that, you could leave this on, till you're done. I mean, you don't ever need to apply this. But if you did want to apply it, you could very easily then grab all of the faces. It will turn these kind of like not real faces into actual geometry. I'm going to hit the Tab key, and I'm going to come in here and say apply. And now, so all these faces here that weren't really here before are now things that we can actually work with here. So I can come out here and extrude another, sort of part of our scene really quickly just by using faces that really weren't even there until we applied the solidify modifier.
Number 4.
Number 4, plane and delete. This is a variation of the one that we were just looking at here. I've got a new plane in here. I've already scaled it up in size, and I'm going to go ahead and tab into edit it. And this time I'm going to right click and select subdivide in here. And that's going to chop it up a little bit. Well, I can come in down here and say, maybe I'll type in 12. I'll type in 12 subdivisions, and now I've got almost like kind of a little grid map. Now the nice thing about this is I can hit things like use the circle select. I can hit the C key to grab circle select, and then kind of paint on areas here where I want to select. Remember, if you're going to do that, you need to hit the enter or return key to tell it you're happy. I'm going to hold the shift key down, and maybe I'll just come over here and grab a few others by using the shift and control or shift and command option to grab some faces. That's more faces than I wanted here. I'll just come in here and manually delete a few of these, and you can just basically kind of paint in areas that are either the areas that you're going to cut out of your scene or areas that you're going to add into your scene. So you can work in either direction. I'm going to then hit the delete key on these faces and get rid of those, and so now I've got the plan of my room. I can come back in with my edges here, grab all those edges, and then I'm going to hit the E key to extrude, hold down the Z key to make sure I'm going up in the Z direction, and I have basically another version of that same approach. So this way, instead of extruding and kind of pushing and pulling, I made this kind of like tile floor here. And the great thing about that is, like, if I go back into the face mode here, I could do something like this, and I could make some columns quite easily. I could just extrude these faces, and this is a great way to create all kinds of sort of rooms very quickly just by using almost like a grid graph paper way of adding walls to your scene. And then you can separate all this, and you can grab the paper thin walls, and you can apply the solidify modifier just like we did in the previous version.
Hello, 5.
Number 5, Extrude Vertexes. This is another variation, but it's also really good if you're tracing over an image that you've brought in. You brought in a reference image or maybe a plan view of something, and you want to trace over it. This is a particularly good one for that. Now, there is a add-on that you can add that gives you more options. Control A and add in a single vertex. Just adding a single vertex will do this, but if you haven't turned on that add-on, you can just do this little trick here. I'm going to grab the plane, I'm going to hit the tab key, and I'm going to, in vertex mode here, vertex mode, I'm going to delete all of these vertices, all but one, and I'm going to have just this one vertex to work with. And now this actually works. You can do this in any view you want, but I think it works a little bit better if you're in top view. So I'm going to hit the E key to extrude this, and then I'm just going to come off to an angle here. This is actually a really good one for turning on your increment snapping. If you just turn that on and leave that on, then you don't have to worry about making sure that the lines are straight. Then I'm going to extrude this way and just hold down the snapping on there, and I'll extrude again, and I'm just going to keep on doing this until I've got the floor plan that I'm looking for. Or, like I say, if you're tracing over an existing plan that is there as an image, this is a great way to do that. And the nice thing about this version is that when you're all done, you've got all of these lines. I can just select A, and now if I move back into a perspective view, I can just extrude, hit the E key, and Z to lock it in the Z direction, and then I've just got my walls there, and I don't have to do that trick about selecting the floor or selecting the ceiling and making sure that you have it separated before you add the solidify modifier. You can just drop the solidify modifier right on here, and there are your walls. And the nice thing about this again is that those walls are just one line thick. So if I want to go back in here, when I can check on even thickness there, I can even turn this off to make it really easy to see. I'm going to go in here and make sure I'm in X-ray view though, so I can grab all four, because now this isn't just, this is a wall now. It's not just dots on the floor here, but I can very easily move these around. Maybe I can make this wall angled. You can do all that sort of thing. And then you can come back in here and just turn your solidify modifier back on, and there you go.
This song is just 6 words long.
Option number 6, extrude from a vertical edge. So I've already jumped in here and taken a default cube and deleted everything except for the 2 vertices that make up one side of the cube. I'm going to jump over here into wireframe to make this a little bit easier for us to see. Let me hide the title. And I've got the little wireframe edge of this wall. Again, probably easier to do in top view, so I'm going to jump over into top view, and I'm just going to hit extrude, and now I'm extruding off both sides of the wall. So in the previous version, basically this is very similar to the previous version, except unlike the previous version, we needed to extrude height of the wall. Right now we're doing it all at the same time. So if I just keep on hitting E to extrude, and I can come over here and keep on snapping onto vertices on the floor there, and I can create the solid walls very quickly. So this is just another way to do that. It's very similar to the previous version, but it creates both the height of the wall and the footprint of the wall at the same time.
How would you feel about 7?
Number 7, Extrude Faces. Again, kind of a variant of the things we've been looking at. But this one may make the most sense of all of them. So I just took a cube and made it a lot skinnier and taller. And now what I can do is select that cube, jump into the edit mode by hitting the tab key, and select a face. Now again, I've got the increment still selected on there, so I can hit extrude and just kind of snap over to another place where I want a wall. And then I can just extrude again and extrude the thickness of the next wall. Now I can go on in a different direction and hit extrude, and I can just keep on doing this, remembering to extrude another little bit for the next piece of the wall there, and keep on going until I've got the space that I want. Then you can come in here and do the Boolean operations, you can add a floor, you can do all the other things that you've seen in the other versions. But this is a version of creating a room that could be very, makes kind of a lot of sense, because you're basically just sort of pushing the walls around where you want them to go.
The number of the day is 8.
Number 8, images as planes. Now, of course, in order for us to see the image on our images planes, we need to be in one of the rendered modes, so I'm in material preview right now. But all I've done is basically taken this image, which I made in Photoshop, and then imported it as an image as plane, and then just put a bunch of knife cuts over here and push things in and out so that I could create this object, and it looks pretty good. So the nice thing about that is you can throw that into an array, and look, you have like instant building in almost no time here using the image as plane, and that works of course for interiors as well. I have a link right up in here that I will talk about. I've covered images as planes in a couple of other places, so rather than go through that all right now, you can watch these links if you want to know how to import this kind of imagery. But you can take these images and you can do whole elevations in scenes and then bring them in and make those the walls of your scene very quickly.
999.
These last two we're going to look at, Archipack and Archimesh, are add-ons. So I can go over here to Edit and Preferences and click on the Add-ons tab and just search for them. We're going to take a look at Archipack first. Now, this does involve opening up the End panel over here. There is an Archipack tab. When you create a new object, you'll get a new tab over here, and you can control it from that End panel. This is not something I would use if you just want to do a quick perspective study that you're going to export out to a painting program and do a little paint over or whatever. It is a little tricky to get your head wrapped around. But if you're going to do a lot of architectural visualization, or you want to work off of blueprints or things, these two plugins do things that pretty much nothing else in Blender does, and it is kind of neat, and that is working parametrically. So what I'm going to do is say Shift A to add a new object, and I'm going to come down here to Mesh and find Archipack here, and notice that there's windows and doors and stairs and other things as well, but we're just going to add in a wall here since we're talking about walls. And now we've got one chunk of a wall segment here, so wall number 1. The neat thing about this is all of these numbers here, if you click on any one of these numbers, you can type in things here. So I can type in 4 meters here and just make that wall longer, and I can click off and deselect it and do other things, and I can come back and select the wall again, and then if I want to click on this little manipulate button, I can get all that back again. Almost nothing in Blender works that way, to where you can go in and grab something and change it parametrically by changing the parameters of something. Now if I wanted to add more walls here, I can just keep on adding parts. So I'll add another wall over there, and maybe I'll make this wall, I don't know, 5 meters long over there, and then I'll come over and add another wall over here. And another way that you can work too is to come over here and grab these and just like physically manipulate them. Grab these little squares, and then you can just kind of yank on them. You can even change the angle of them at the same time. So you say I change the angle of that wall just by grabbing it. So you can work very parametrically, or you can even just kind of grab on things as well. And I can come down over here with the object selected and say, well, what if I want to make this wall a curved wall? Well, that's wall 2. So I can go from straight to curved and just add that kind of curved shape there to the object. And if I want to just check the close button there, I've just closed the shape, and now I've got an enclosed room. Now we can bring in those doors and windows and start adding objects to this room. And that's kind of neat. And that really, the idea of being able to come back later on and say, you know what, actually I've changed my mind. I want to actually change the height of this. I want to add in an extra chunk of wall or whatever. That's almost impossible to do in any other part of Blender. So let's take a look at the other one next.
Into number 10 and straight to business.
And last but not least, number 10, Archimesh, which is another one of these ones that takes a little bit of getting used to, but if you're going to do a lot of architectural visualization, or you're going to be copying off of drawings and things, it's one worth knowing about. I'm just going to click into the scene and say Shift A, and I'm going to add way down at the bottom here Archimesh, and I'm going to add a room. And we add rooms in here very similarly to the way that you add them in Archipack here, just by increasing the number of walls. So I'll just come over here and go ahead and add a couple, but instead of closing those walls, it's just allowing us to find wall 1, 2, and 3, so I can click on the language length of wall 1, and I'll just type in 4 meters in there to change the length of that wall. It's also automatically adding a baseboard. It's doing all kinds of things. If you check the little advanced tab, you can make it a curved wall. That's very easy to do, and you can change the angle of walls. There's a lot of things that you can do. It also has the ability to use this little auto hole function in here. If you give your wall a little bit of thickness, then you can bring in things like doors. And when I bring in a door here, you'll see it's added in a door group. And this door group includes Boolean operations that automatically cut things out of the wall. It takes a little bit of poking around in here, but there's a lot of really fun stuff. There's Venetian blinds. There's all kinds of things that you can do to add to your scene. And if we go ahead and look at the whole list of them in here, we've got a whole lot of different ways that we can add walls and create rooms very quickly in Blender. So give a couple of those a try. Don't feel afraid to mix and match different techniques and see which ones work best for you.